Welcome to our March 9th, 2022 Douglas County Board of Commissioners 5:30 business meeting. I want to welcome those of you who are with us here in the Old County Courthouse and anybody who's joining us virtually on Zoom. I'll just share a bit about how we conduct our meetings. Each action item that is on the agenda will offer an opportunity for public comment specific to that topic. We ask that you do wait until the agenda item you're here for has come up for presentation and discussion amongst commissioners, then we'll open up comment. Near the beginning of our meeting, before discussing those regular business items, we'll invite folks to offer general public comment, which is for items not on today's agenda, but general county business. All public comments should be directed to the county commission. We'll hear from folks who are with us in person first, then we'll go to online commenters. If you are joining us on Zoom, please use the raise your hand function when the time comes, and staff will call on you and unmute you one at a time. All public comments will be limited to 3 minutes. We ask that speakers give their full name and Douglas County residence for meeting minutes. And the county does reserve the right to mute and remove any speaker who's vulgar, rude, or inappropriate. If visual aids are used during the meeting, the presenter will share their screen. Please know that any online participants will need a computer, smartphone, or tablet to view that, but also materials are uploaded on our website as a part of our agenda packet for other access. And presenters will be made panelists and unmuted each time their agenda item comes up. And we just ask that you stay muted if you're not speaking. And please also introduce yourselves at each time you speak for the record. And just a reminder that this meeting is being recorded and will be available on both our website and YouTube page after we adjourn. And for this evening, we are going to kick off the meeting with a proclamation. So I will go ahead and read the proclamation for Americorps Week and then invite guests that we have from United Way of Douglas County to provide any further comments. And we'll go from there. Excuse me. So on this March 9th, 2022, a proclamation for Americorps Week. Whereas service to others is a hallmark of the American character, and throughout our history, citizens have stepped up to meet our challenges by volunteering in their communities. And whereas Americorps members provide opportunities for nearly 75,000 Americans to serve their country through an intensive commitment to service at nonprofits, schools, public agencies, and community and faith-based groups across the country. And whereas Americorps enriches the lives of its members, building habits that create engaged citizens who are active participants in civic matters affecting their communities long after their service terms are completed. And whereas Americorps members encourage collaboration and partnerships, leveraging millions of volunteers in service and acquiring the support of business partners to increase the effectiveness of their initiatives. And whereas Americorps and Americorps Vista members serving in various locations across Douglas County, Kansas, are actively addressing challenges facing our community, from fighting food and housing insecurity, running after school programming, assisting health and human service agencies in their response to the COVID pandemic, to supporting health and financial literacy and training our youth for the future. National service expands economic opportunity by creating more sustainable, resilient communities and providing education, career skills, and leadership abilities for those who serve. Whereas Americorps Week is an opportunity to recognize the dedication and commitment of the more than 1 million Americans who have chosen to serve their county through Americorps and their community partners, and to encourage more Americans to follow their footsteps in service. Now, therefore, let it be resolved, the Board of County Commissioners of Douglas County, Kansas, do hereby designate March 13th to 19th, 2022 as Americorps Week, and urge citizens to thank Americorps members and alumni for their service and to find their own ways to give back to the communities. Adopted on this 9th day of March 2022. Thank you all so much for your service. Anybody who's here from United Way or Americorps members that may be with us, please feel free to come up, make a few comments if you'd like about further service. We also have a proclamation to give you and available to take a photo with you if you want that. So
I also think it's important just to recognize, I just want to thank the staff of the United Way for working so hard to apply for the grant, how hard KJ in particular works to recruit and support agencies in all the nuts and bolts logistics of participating in the program. It has so much impact, and I appreciate you all so much.
So in Douglas County, we have multiple programs. We have one at the United Way, which I'm here representing as the program director. We also have Brady, who's at the Boys and Girls Club. And then we also have you Americorps members at Harvesters through Just Foods. And then we also have here today, Kay Emerson, who is the statewide Americorps director.
Thank you all so much. And I will, thanks for the shout out, Mandy. I was a former Americorps member, so that's exciting for me to get to read this. I did a year of service in Brooklyn, New York, and a year of service back here at United Way. And the program has really expanded in the county since then. So I appreciate all the thoughtful work that has been done by United Way to get people plugged into different types of work. And Kay Emerson, I did not know that about you, that you were the statewide Americorps director. So how cool. Thank you for joining us tonight. Have a good night. Okay, we will go ahead and move on to the consent agenda. Would any commissioner like to discuss anything further?
I'd like to pull item 4 for a little further discussion.
Okay. Procedurally, shall it go for a motion for approving elsewhere? Okay. Oh, yes, thank you. Is anybody in the public, would anybody like to pull anything from our consent agenda here in the courthouse? Okay, seeing none. Anybody with the raised hand online? Okay, great. Thank you for that reminder.
This is Commissioner Portillo. I would like to move to approve items 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, and 2.5 on the consent agenda.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay. Now procedurally, should we move that to the
That moves to the action agenda,
Okay.
so we should take public
General
comment,
public
and then
comment
that'll be
first.
our first item on the action agenda.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. With that in mind, Jill, would you mind handing me a sign up sheet that I noticed over there? Thank you. So we'll go ahead and do general public comment now. Just as a reminder, this is for items not on today's agenda, but general county business. Your comments will be limited to 3 minutes. And we will start with Amy, please. Sorry, we pushed the button. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Amy Boffman. I am a Douglas County resident. I just wanted to speak to make sure you all know where I and many other people stand on any and all mandates. There should have never been any lockdowns. They did not help. It actually made quite a few businesses close. The quarantines as well are an overreach. Definitely no masks. They have done more harm than good. There will be more illnesses coming down the pipes from the powers that be. Many of us hope and pray that you all have learned from this and encourage people to take proactive measures to stay healthy and fight off these germs, whatever they are. Remember, I told you zinc, vitamin C, D3, and a multivitamin, lots of water, good rest, and a healthy diet. I've been doing this for 2 years. From February 2020 to December 21st, that's 22 months, I had COVID twice in that amount of time. I had only 3 symptoms the second time, the loss of taste and smell. They were the only way I knew I had it. Since natural immunity is 6 times better than the vaccine, I wouldn't dare contaminate my healthy body with that. Speaking of the vaccine, did you hear that Pfizer and Moderna have now admitted that the mRNA is in fact gene therapy? It is a whole new category of drug, really. Explains why they had to change the definition of vaccine to include this one. There is a lot of corruption and covering up going on right now. We have had to deal with medical malpractice. All of it is at the expense of the American taxpayers. How mad do you think we are? COVID is a bioweapon, probably along the same lines of what they are doing in the biolabs in Ukraine. We also won't forget about people that are supposed to work for us. We pay their and your salaries, however small or big. Taxes, taxes, taxes. The big man is always screwing the American citizens these days. Slavery is what it is. Fauci is a liar and a fraud. I've told you that before. He makes more than even the President of the United States. We should not have to listen to or do a darn thing he says at this point. He should be tried for treason, and anyone who withheld ivermectin and people died should be held accountable. I hope you 3 will in the future do research, not the research that the deep state and powers that be feed you, but the research that all the people do. Also, listen to we the people and read the information they give you. I won't be forced to do anything that I think is bad for me or my kids. Thank you.
Justin?
My name is Dr. Justin Spees. I stood here last week and I told you guys that I would never forget what you did with your mandates to my life and to all the children in Lawrence. And so I want you to consider this your weekly reminder that I haven't forgot. We worked hard to get the mandates removed. We protested. I sat in a protest every single day for 7 months straight. Every single day. Hot, cold, snow. Didn't matter. So I'm persistent. So we got the mandates removed, and now it's time for accountability. And it's not just you guys. It's the city commissioners. It's the school board. It's the sheriff. It's the deputies that denied us the right to come in here and speak to you guys. It's this guy here that wags his finger at me like he's so much better than me or something. It's Subway, it's Chipotle, it's the library that wouldn't let me speak to my representative here because of your mask mandates. It's Dillon's, it's Rock Chalk Park, it's Ace Hardware. It's every doctor and every dentist in town. Your mandates allowed people to be treated like second-class citizens and for their fellow Americans to treat them like second-class citizens. We're starting to now see the issues roll in from what these mandates have done to children. And people out there, you need to realize, make the connection. You're seeing an uptick in violence and aggression. It's because of what these mandates did, people. That's what it is. It's so obvious. Don't let them forget what they've done to the kids. And we told them for months and months and months what was going on, and come to find out, you guys relied on a doctor who cited one study every single time. No new studies, not additional studies, nothing changes. Same study every single time as his evidence. I'm a college professor. If a student tried to do that to me, I would be like, what are you doing? You need a little bit more than this. And this is for a college paper. Now you're talking about the lives of people. And one study is who you listen to. Yeah, I'll see you next week.
Sue?
Hi, I'm Sue Herring. I live here in Lawrence, and I'm not going away either. I'll be back. I hope you're a little surprised to see us back. I had the idea that maybe getting rid of the mask mandate would alleviate some of the public comment that jabs at you every week. But I'm going to continue. Every week I'll return to remind you of the harm you cause as county commissioners, and here's why. Over and over again, week after week, many people have spoken here asking for your help. We were ignored. The three of you followed Dr. Marcellano's and Dan Partridge's advice. Children were harmed by being masked. None of you bothered to examine the source or sources used by Mr. Partridge and Dr. Marcellano to make the policies that have harmed children. You all went along to get along, ignoring all of us who brought evidence week after week, showing you the harm being done and the reasons for it. The study that was used by Dr. Marcellano and Dan Partridge has been debunked. That study cherry-picked data and manipulated charts. Dr. Lee Norman, the director of Kansas Health, who used this study, has lost his job. For the harm you all caused, I'm demanding tonight that you resign, as Dr. Norman did, all three of you. You have no credibility left. Thank you.
Is there anybody else here that would like to provide public comment? Okay, anybody online? Okay, thank you. Okay, so we will go back to item 2.4 from the consent agenda. Commissioner Kelly, would you like to say more?
Yeah, sir, this is a question for you. Can you go over maybe a little bit that second paragraph? Is that just for this year, or is that for all years going forward that's in the enclosure?
Yes, commissioners, that is intended for the remainder of 2022. We're in the middle of our plan year and for the rest of this fiscal year. So that was to delineate what the plan was for the remainder of 2022. And I think Patrick Schmitz is here. I can try to promote him if we want to make sure there's.
I'm fine with that as long
Okay.
as if that's
my
that's the way
understanding.
you understand it. And I just want to make sure we're not holding future commissions to any kind of agreement. We articulated that in I think our last meeting, and just wanted to make sure. I didn't see a date there in that paragraph, so I just want to clarify that.
Yep, that's our intent. Thank you.
Okay.
Any further questions or comments about this item? Okay.
This is Commissioner Portillo. Just appreciation for the clarity. Thank you.
Yep, thanks. So I'm looking for a motion to go ahead and approve that. Do we need to make it specific? You know, since we usually batch consent agenda items, should we be more specific on this one?
I'm happy to make the motion to approve Burt Nash employees off county health insurance effective June 1, 2022.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you for that. Okay. So for our regular agenda, item 4.1, Catalyst Incentive Program for Industrial Development Overview. Sarah, who do we have with us?
Thank you, Commissioners. Britt Crumcano with the City of Lawrence is being moved into the panel to just give us an overview and a presentation on the Catalyst program. This is something we haven't done with this commission, and thought it would be good before we have a particular project on hand to just get an overview of the basics and have city staff available for you if you have any particular questions. So with this, I'll turn it over to you, Britt.
Thanks, Sarah, and good evening, County Commissioners. I'm Britt Crumcano, the Economic Development Director for the City of Lawrence. Thank you for having me here, and I'm happy to provide you with a brief overview of the Catalyst program. This program was just recently extended for another 3 years by the City Commission. So I think it is timely that I kind of come and give you a recap of it. So I'm going to try to share my screen, and so you can see my slides here. Here we go. Okay, so just very quickly, this is a special assistance program. It's only for industrial projects that are in Lawrence, and it must meet these projects in order to be eligible, must meet certain eligibility requirements. It was designed from the very beginning to be a very streamlined approval process, so participation is granted by the City Commission. So how it all started. Well, we, several years back, we had this new business park, Lawrence Venture Park, and we struggled to get anybody to come to it. We spent years and years and years trying to market this and just had absolutely no traction whatsoever. Very difficult. Generally with business parks, it's always hard to kind of get the first tenant, and then after you kind of landed that first tenant, others are a little less apprehensive about coming on board. So we knew that we at least had to get the first tenant, and so we started thinking about maybe some proactive ways that we could offer this park and entice these industrial businesses to come to Lawrence. So, but as you can see now, this is our map of what the park looks like at this point, and it has been filling up quite nicely. So we are very proud of that. But back before we started the Catalyst program, like I said, we were having a really hard time getting any tenant to come on board. So just a little history. It was approved in 2017. It was authorized for a couple of years. We just didn't know how successful this program was going to be. It was the very first proactive incentive package that we've ever offered. Most of the time we're reactive. We have a developer who comes to us and says, I want to do XYZ. And then we decide, you know, okay, do we want that or not? But this, we knew what we wanted in the park. And so we basically defined a list of eligibility requirements. It became a very prescriptive type of program and proactive. So again, we really had to think kind of out of the box and try something very, very different, because what we had before was not working. Throughout the years, we tweaked it a little bit. We added, it started out being just for Lawrence Venture Park and East Hills Business Park. And since then, it has been expanded to any IG, which is industrial general zoning within the city of Lawrence. Again, as long as the project meets certain thresholds. It was renewed in 2019. And then again, some small tweaks. And then just recently, it was renewed for another 3 years by the City Commission. So it's good through April of 2025. And it'll be examined at that point to again see how successful the program has been, and if it wants to, if we want to continue on with it. So here's just an overview of all the projects that have come on board since we first started this program. I think it kind of speaks for itself. Again, trying to realize that we couldn't get any additional industrial projects on board. And since then, we have added almost 1 million square feet of industrial space. The capital investment is almost 83 million. The jobs, this is a program, because it is a prescriptive type of package, we don't require job creation requirements, and we don't also require them to be reported. So these are estimated numbers from what the companies have shared with us, but we've also had approximately 503 new jobs created out with this program. So this is the package. It is a 10-year property tax abatement. It is at a minimum of 50% level. If the project is built to LEED Silver equivalency, then they can earn a 70% level of abatement. They don't have to be LEED certified, but they do have to submit the LEED scorecard and have their architect sign off and say that, yes, this was built to that standard in order to earn that percentage. It also can get them an IRB sales tax exemption on construction materials, which really helps in terms of the front end of the project to help it make it a little more affordable to build. And then the city and the county at their discretion can provide land in the parks at no cost. Of course, this doesn't happen throughout the city on the IG zone land that is privately owned, but in the parks, free land has been a great enticer. The state also provides a personal property tax exemption, actually for all businesses on machinery and equipment. This looks very attractive if we're trying to bring somebody in from out of state. And then the city waives its application fees and its origination fees as well. So that's the whole package. Here's the requirements. It depends on what park they're building in or where they're building. And it depends on if it's new building construction or if it's an expansion. So basically it goes anywhere from a 15,000 square foot expansion in East Hills up to 75,000 square feet of a new project in Fincher Park. Throughout the years, we added a little bit of capital investment because we wanted to make sure that there was a certain level of construction that was done out there. So capital investment ranges anywhere from a minimum of $1 million up to $5 million. For the most part, even $5 billion is a basic shell. And that was several years ago, so it's probably even less at this point because of the cost of materials. I have added these in. I want to thank Steve Miles and Brad Eldridge with the Appraiser's Office because they have been so good to provide us some data on how these projects are performing. One of the things that I think a lot of citizens don't realize when we do incentivize a project is that we're still getting revenue in during that whole incentive period. And oftentimes, like in the case of the Van Trust building, it was built on vacant land. So that property was bringing in very little money before it was developed. So even during the tax abatement period, the taxing jurisdictions are getting, a significant amount more of tax revenues than what they would have if the project had stayed undeveloped. And then of course, the real payoff is after the abatement expires in 10 years and we now have a higher value property completely on the property tax rolls. So there's 3 catalyst projects that are actually getting their abatements at this point. This was the first one. This is the spec building. This is Plasticon. Plasticon did an expansion out of East Hills Business Park. They have been really going gangbusters with their business. And this was their phase 1 and 2 expansion. And then Grandstand also did an expansion out there. Again, Grandstand's been kind of one of our local success stories, and they have been doing fabulous business. They have just barely come on board with the abatement on their expansion. And so we only have 1 year of data there, but I'd like to kind of show that to give everybody an idea, because most of these projects, we're getting some kind of a decent return during the incentive period, as well as, like I always say, the real payoff is afterwards. And so it's a really nice way of investing in our real estate assets here in the community. And I will open it up to questions and answers, but before I do that, I wanted to invite Steve Kelly to also speak about the program, because Steve works with this program day in and day out, and I think he's on board here. And so Sarah, if you wouldn't mind letting him speak, and then I'd be happy to answer questions after.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and move Steve into the panel. Britt, could you go? Yep, thanks for taking the presentation down.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right. Thank you very much for promoting me to be a panelist. I saw that come up. I'm very impressed. I'm Steve Kelly with the Lawrence Chamber and EDC, and I don't have prepared remarks. I just did want to follow up a little bit on some of what Britt has spoken of, and she has a lot more facts and information than I really do, but did want to reiterate and reinforce some of the comments that she made. I I think as she expressed, the experience with Lawrence Venture Park in particular, after it became a property that the city was trying to market for industrial development, was very slow in taking off. And I think it was a variety of things. I think it was some apprehension of the property because of its past history. I think there was also some concerns about the process that the city had in place, the kind of, I'll call it the normal process that where the company would work with the city. It caused some consternation because it was a pretty extended, protracted process without a lot of certainty that was built into it, which is very critical for a company who's making, in many cases, millions and millions of dollars of investment or potential investment. And that can be a real negative from their perspective. And I think it was also very important to provide a program that, as Britt said, is fairly streamlined, fairly easy to follow for both the company and the city to work with. And I think that was critical. And so that was the first step. And I think the second step, and I believe it was a direct result of the first step that was taken, was to get Van Trust to do the spec building. Because as Brick has alluded to, when you don't have anything happening on a particular property in an industrial park, I think it leads to questions as to, or apprehension maybe, as to what is wrong with the property? Why isn't anything happening here? And having Van Trust, which is a well-respected developer, not only in the Kansas City market, but in the entire country, they do projects all over, I think put a little bit of faith in the minds of other people that if Van Trust is investing here, that's a pretty strong endorsement. So I think that was very positive. I think the other thing that happened is just the fact that we were able to get through the combination of the Catalyst and Van Trust, get a building up. So we had a property to show was also very valuable because as there are projects that are circulating and you're trying to get on the radar screen, having a property, even if it doesn't turn out to be a property that will exactly work for a prospect or for a company, it's also valuable because they are at least listening and they see that you are actively in the market. And I think that has helped us as well. That kind of combination has led to the Pretzels project coming. I think it was also a strong factor in US engineering. And we've seen continued good activity at the park since Catalyst was initiated and since Van Trust was there. And I think it's also led, if you look at the investment that's occurred outside of the park, the investment by Berry Global, the investment by Standard Beverage, Plasticon, Grandstand that Britt already spoke about. Not only is there a real estate investment, which Britt showed on the chart that she displayed, but there are millions and millions and millions of dollars of capital investment that's also going into machinery and equipment. In fact, in most of these projects, the investment on equipment far outweighs the real estate investment. So companies are making real tangible investment in the community. They're adding significant number of jobs. And I think that's very important. And again, the Catalyst has been, I think, a major factor in moving us forward and getting that kind of activity and that kind of achievement in terms of developing some of this manufacturing base that we're looking to have. And that concludes my comments. And again, thanks for the opportunity to say a few words, and I'll be quiet.
Thank you, Steve. And like I said, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Great. This is Commissioner Reed. Thank you so much, Britt, for that presentation and overview. Thanks for your comments, Steve. I've got just one question, really, I think, specific to the LEED well, you said it's not certified. So basically they show you a score sheet to get up to that 70% tax abatement. Have you, and maybe it was in one of the slides and I missed it. Have you had any companies take advantage of that yet? Has it been enticing to any of the manufacturers as that extra 20%?
Yes, actually, almost every single one will bill to the LEED silver equivalency so they can get that extra percentage. In fact, I don't think I have one yet that has not met that requirement.
Okay, great. Thank you. Questions from fellow commissioners?
This is Commissioner Portillo. I really appreciate the presentation and I really appreciate how successful this program has been and the types of companies that it's brought into our community. I just have a bit of a process question. You mentioned that the city has reapproved this program through 2025. It seems like these types of incentives require approval from both the city and the county. So how does this work from a process perspective when we're bringing in companies under the Catalyst program?
Well, Steve can maybe help me with this in terms of the reality of how it all works. But the Catalyst is not really an incentive program, it's an incentive package. So all the incentives that it gets that are provided, they still have to go through the same requirements that they would if it was not in the package. So a tax abatement would still have to go through the same requirements, whether it's part of the Catalyst program or not. And so process-wise, that is, we just follow whatever the state requires us to do on that. There's some tools that require more process that you're probably going to be confronted with more so than others. Like, for example, the neighborhood revitalization area. That is a tool that the applicant actually has to come to the city, the county, and the school district separately and ask for their participation separately. Again, that's part of state statute requirements. With this package, it really just depends on, the tool, which is the property tax abatement. So we just follow the state requirements for that.
Well, and help me understand, because this tool only has to do with IG zoned land. So this wouldn't deal with neighborhood revitalization.
Correct, yes.
Okay. And Sarah, sorry, it looked like you
Yeah,
were trying to jump
Britta,
in.
so can you explain then what is the state statute then process for the city and the county to approve the abatement? Does it, just walk them through the process of the approvals?
Yeah, I think typically we do this in consultation with bond counsel, but typically we would send a letter to the county explaining that we have something coming up. I typically would put in a technical report. And then I believe by state statute, the county has 30 days. I could be wrong about this, but the county has a certain amount of time in which they can come back and say no and stop the tax abatement. I believe that's how it works.
Okay, so what I'm understanding is that the city commission has kind of given pre-approval for this package of incentives. And the city commission has said that they will give this pre-approval through 2025, which means that our city commission currently has approved some potential packages for future city commissions, if they could. I don't know.
The request still has to come before the city commission though, and it still has to be considered. So eligibility has been streamlined. If they meet certain requirements, they're automatically eligible. So we don't have to go through as much process, which helps with the streamlining. Then they go in front of the city commission and the commission can approve their participation in the Catalyst program.
So if a company doesn't qualify, what does the process look like there? Like, what is the eligibility piece that a company gets for being a part of Catalyst? What would it look like if they weren't part of Catalyst?
If they don't qualify for Catalyst, they have one other option, which is to go through a traditional property tax abatement. And that has to do with policy, which is so much more involved. There's all sorts of requirements in the policy. You can earn a certain percentage on top of a base percentage, depending on different things that the project would bring on board. There's requirements, there's reporting requirements, there's annual requirements for job creation, for health insurance that the company would provide, for meeting a minimum wage requirement. There's just a lot of additional process and requirements and reporting. So there's a lot more on the front end and there's a lot more on the back end as well.
So it sounds like the Catalyst program then means that companies won't have to provide some of that wage data, healthcare data, or wage
That
minimums.
That is correct. They can do it on a voluntary basis, but that is not required like it is in the traditional program.
Do we have any sort of data that compares companies that have gone through the traditional process and companies that have gone through the Catalyst process and different wages that they're paying, given that that's one of the areas that the traditional process does monitor?
I don't have it with me, but every year we put out an annual economic development report, and all of that information is in the report. It's on our website as well. And that totally spells out, right now we only have 2 properties that are under a traditional property tax abatement. That's the Grandstand, their main building. And I believe 2021 was the end of that tax abatement. So it'll be coming, it came off the abatement period in 2021, so it's fully on the tax rolls now. And then Sunlight Science and Technology, that's a second company that has pursued a traditional property tax abatement. I will say with Sunlight, it was a little different because it was a very small business. And part of the problem with our traditional property tax abatements is that it's really only set up for big players. And Sunlight was a graduate of the Bioscience and Technology Business Center. We didn't want to lose them outside of the community. So there were special, I guess, provisions given to be able to keep that smaller company, which is always up to the governing body if they want to, waive some of those requirements that are in the city policy. But that has been a criticism of our traditional program, is it's really not set up to help small businesses.
And does the Catalyst program provide anything that would be like an incentive for smaller businesses?
I think the thresholds are relatively small when it comes to the size requirements as well as the capital investment requirements. But it would still have to be for a project that it's for new construction. So it's going to rule out any of those companies that want to get a property tax abatement on an existing property, which is what Sunlight wanted to do.
And it's industrial zoning.
It's
So,
industrial zoning and it has to be industrial use.
right. So if you were something located outside of that, you wouldn't be eligible for Catalyst.
That's correct. That's correct.
Now, the Neighborhood Revitalization Act program, it is a rebate, but the way it's been used here is a pretty significant tax abatement on on a significant amount of new construction. And that can go for both new construction and expansion.
Correct. That's a totally different tool that ruled by a different state statute. It's used for, a lot of times you'll see it for rehabbing historic properties. It can be used to, there's certain state statute requirements. There's 3 of which the property and the project have to meet at least one of those. And so that's how they would fit under the NRA or the Neighborhood Revitalization Act.
If I might add, again, this is Steve Kelly at the chamber. When we're talking about new construction, it isn't necessarily for a new building. We have had facilities that have expanded, but it is new construction in that form. So if someone is working within the same footprint and just adding equipment, that would not be a qualifying use. But like the expansion of Grandstand, that was a qualifying use. It was new construction, but it was an expansion of the existing building, a significant expansion of the existing building, as opposed to something like Pretzels Inc. or the U.S. Engineering facility, which is currently under construction and coming online later this spring, where those are from the ground up new buildings.
Thank you.
So just to make sure I understand this correctly, this is a package. So when a potential industrial development comes, if they wanted more than 70%, they'd have to go through the larger process. this sort of just provides some clarity on if you're looking for these things and you meet these thresholds, this is the package that would be put together and avoids a long process of negotiating multiple levels. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, yes, Commissioner Kelly, that is pretty well in a nutshell what it is. Now, with the caveat that the city commission can always go beyond their policy, but for the most part, it's pretty straightforward and they pretty well stick to the same thing. So it's either 50% or 70%.
And then it has to be approved still by the city and the county. This isn't an automatic.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we've seen those come before us. And then the other two questions, one is I just want to check numbers because I've toured Pretzels Inc. and really impressive facility. And the jobs supported is 281. I found that surprising when US Engineering was at 162,000 square feet and was at half of that. So is that the potential jobs they think? Is that the jobs? And that just seems like a really large number to me based on what I observed out at the plant.
Yeah, again, with the Catalyst program, they aren't held to any kind of requirements for stating how many jobs they're going to create. So basically, they give us a ballpark idea, usually during the application process. But again, they're not held to that. So depending on what their circumstances are, they may have a banner year, and year one, they bring on more. Year two, they might bring on, less. So what you're seeing there is probably the number that was given off the application, and it could cover a particular period of time. I don't recall offhand what it was, but it's not uncommon to see those numbers over a 5-year period.
Commissioner Kelly, if I could add as well, again, this is Steve Kelly at the Chamber. The 281 number that's been quoted for Pretzels is consistent with the information that was provided to the state for the state incentive programs. And I think as Britt has indicated, that's over a period of time. When the tours took place at their ribbon cutting grand opening, I believe they were in the 65 or 70 employee range, but that's something that they plan to ramp up over time. And as you recall, there's only 1 or 2 lines out of what will be 5 or 6 lines that are operating. So that is the 281 is kind of at full operation as they plan, and kind of the same way with Pretzels Inc. It's a larger building, but it's a different type of manufacturing. So their intent, and I was out there the other day, and they're coming along nicely, but they will not have the as high a level in terms of numbers of employees because of the nature of what they're going to be doing. But it will be somewhere in the 125, 140 range potentially when they're fully operational and maxing out. So the 281 is kind of the projected at full operation, or what they consider to be full operation.
And there's no requirement for them to give follow-up numbers in the 10 years that they're receiving an abatement as part of this program?
That is correct. And that was by design, because when we first started this project with this package, we were considering spec development. In fact, the first building that went in was spec development. And if you are doing a spec building, you have no idea who your tenant is going to be and what they're going to be doing or how many jobs they're going to be creating. So in order to accommodate that, we really needed to drop that requirement.
Just a few more questions. So it has to be approved by the city and the county, and this is something that was developed by the city. Steve, this may be a question for you as you deal with applicants. I can't recall a project coming through that hasn't been approved by both the city and the county. The county's amount of tax abatement is lower than the city's amount of tax abatement. Correct me if I'm wrong on any of that. Have you heard concerns that this is a city designed program, and if they bring it to the county, they may not get those dollars?
I personally have not heard that. Britt, actually works with the the applicants on a more direct basis and may have more detail. I have not heard that brought up as an issue. Or that has been expressed to me that that's a concern or an issue. But Brett, I toss it to you. Has that been something that's been raised as a concern to you?
No, I don't think that's ever been raised as a concern, and the county has been very good about supporting these types of projects because it does have such a nice payoff, I think, for all of us. And so I don't think that's ever really been questioned.
I think by and large, or, you know, and I can't think of a case where it hasn't been. What the commentary has been is an appreciation for the manner that it has been streamlined and the certainty of the process. That it's well prescribed, they know what the requirements are going in, they know what the benefits are going in. It's able to be moved through the process more quickly than the traditional PERC process, with a greater understanding of what you need to do and where you'll end up at the end if you do those things. And so I think that's been what I think is the real benefit. Is it's something that folks can rely on. They can understand what the rewards are and what the requirements are. And they also appreciate that the process is streamlined, and they can see the end of the process and how you get there. Where I think, and again, a lot of this was before my time, I think with the other process, there's been concerns expressed about the uncertainty, and sometimes the things would change in the middle of the process, and that was very disconcerting to companies and the folks that were working on it, because it was very hard sometimes to see where the goal line was.
Yeah, I would agree with Steve. I think
Portillo, I really appreciate that framing. And I think that having some certainty and process for companies that we're looking to recruit is incredibly important. It does sound like the city has had a chance to have these discussions and then approve this as a package that's being put forward to companies because they've had a chance to vote on it as a commission. It does seem like it may paint us as a commission into a bit of a corner because we're presenting this as something stable for companies that the city has already considered, but the county commission then there's an assumption of approval when we as a commission haven't had those conversations prior to the package being put out like the city has.
Britt or Steve, do you have any further comments to follow up about that?
Well, I would just say again, we follow state statute when it comes to the whole process for the property tax abatement. So that hasn't changed at all. I would say even for a regular property tax abatement, a non-catalyst property tax abatement, it should be the same notification process, and then the period at which the county commission could go ahead and say no if they wished. I think the design of this, and I think the benefit of this has been it's very streamlined. And I think that's been a huge factor in terms of attracting all these companies and making it so that they can actually build in a period of time that, this market is challenging in a lot of ways, and it has been for a lot of, at least through the COVID times, but now even more so with the materials and that sort of thing. So I think companies, in my opinion, are looking for efficiency. And I think that's exactly what this package offers them.
Absolutely. And you hear no arguments from me, or I don't want to speak on behalf of my fellow commissioners, but I think that certainty and that discussion is an important part of how we do economic development. I think that my comment was much more about how do we coordinate, because it sounds like this is something that the city commission has had a chance to consider, but we're only getting to consider it on the back end as part of that state statute process.
Yes and no. What I would say is that as soon as I am notified, we will put it in front of our agenda and in front of the commissioners for consideration approval. We just haven't had one in the last year or so. And so like, if the commission has concerns and considerations on, I think then that would be the time to voice it, and companies would have to respond. The reason why I wanted to bring this to you all today was, you saw the requirements. If we have concerns with how the Catalyst program is structured from a county perspective, I'd rather talk about the program as a whole, and as opposed to waiting until we had a particular application, they had already done some due diligence and then we'd started that. So, I know, Britt, that the city commission just reauthorized this program for 5 years. Is that a step that the county commission needs to take as well? To reauthorize the program for the next 5 years?
Well, it was authorized for 3 years, Sarah. I
Okay.
don't know that the county commission has to. I also don't know if the county commission, if they want to, if there's any reason why they can't. So I guess what I'd have to do is just check in with, Diane Stoddard, my boss, and ask about process. But if the county would like to vote on it, I imagine there's no reason why they couldn't.
I think it would be helpful. And that way we can say that the city and the county are unified in our packages that we're putting in front of companies that are coming. So that there is less kind of guesswork and more transparency in that process.
This is Commissioner Reed, I would agree with that. And I think that is what I heard primarily in Commissioner Portillo's comment and earlier question is it's that the package is being renewed for a 3-year cycle that was a intentional conversation that happened at the city commission level in order to take action to do that. But there was not that conversation at our level, at the county level. And I think that in the future, that if it is possible for both of us to have a review of that and participation in addressing any pieces of it that we think may need adjustment or additions that could be better, that it contributes to even more collaboration between the city and county since this is such a growing program, it seems. I also just wanted to ask Sarah if there are, I'm sure if there are much smaller scale, but are there any similar programs that you're aware of in the other 3 municipalities in terms of specific city kind of run programs, or maybe programs that are similar to these incentives that are interlocal agreements between city and county?
Not structured like Catalyst.
Okay.
Eudora, the Nottingham project.
That's what I was thinking of.
Is a TIF district, and that has some incentives based to it. But it's mostly, sales tax revenue generated from it. So not that I'm aware of. I hate to say.
No, that's
No.
okay. I know I kind of put you on the spot. It was just something that I was thinking of in terms of, we have all kinds of interlocal agreements with all the different governments. So this is an example of one. Commissioner Kelly, did you have more to add?
I think where Commissioner Portillo was going was sort of to my question of has it ever been brought up by a perspective that, this seems to be of something that was developed by the city. Are we worried that the county doesn't have that? And, it sounds to me there's some interest here on the commission of sort of stamping our approval, or if there are other things. I think it will get a little messier if we start to think like we've got some different things that we want to put in there because they've already approved it. And so I think that would be something for the commission to think about, whether they want to add things to the Catalyst program, because then we're actually probably creating a separate process. They've created one and we've created one, and you can look at those packages and see how they work. And so, but I do think, the point has been made that it creates a tension if the city has put forward a project, a package together with the assumption that the county will do the same, puts that county sort of like, okay, you're just assuming that we're going to do that. And I'm not sure I'm hearing, but we haven't really fully discussed it, that we want more on there. We just want to make sure that we are a full partner. So we're not put in that space of tension, is sort of what I'm hearing. I think I'm hearing, heads are nodding. You probably can't see that, Britt and Steve, but I think that's what I'm hearing is we just want to make sure that, and it may be a benefit to you as you look for prospective applications to say both the city and the county are on board with this package. And yes, they do need to do the approval by state statute, but they've both sort of agreed that this looks like a reasonable package.
This is Commissioner Reed, thank you for that. And I'll affirm that there were positive head nods, and I think that was a great articulation of our discussion and the consensus about it. So with that, I'll ask if there are any further questions from commissioners. Okay, I'll go ahead and open it up for public comment. Don't think that there's anybody here wishing to make public comment on this item. Does anybody raise their hand online? Okay, great, thanks. Go ahead and close public comment, bring this back for any further thoughts. And this is an item that doesn't have any action. Is that correct, Sarah?
Yes, I mean, initially I just had thought of this as a presentation. It does sound like perhaps, Britt, maybe you could take back this conversation, and Steve, to city folks and see what their thoughts are about bringing before the county a formal approval for the Catalyst program for the upcoming 3 years. And now that we've had this overview and presentation, that we could have that as a formal agenda item in the future. Thoughts on that, Britt?
Yeah, I'll be happy to do that. I'll go ahead and bring it back to the city and just get some thoughts on, how we would do that. And maybe it just, like you said, Sarah, since we've already done the presentation, maybe it's just an agenda item. But I'll need to kind of check in with others at the city on process and how to do that.
Can I make a little alterations, Commissioner Kelly, to what you just said? Sarah, I think we could direct staff to work with the city to bring, I don't know that we need to ask the city of Lawrence's permission for us to do anything. So I think it would be fine for us to just direct staff to work with the city to bring back something to us, which reaffirms that we are supportive of this incentive package along with the city, if that's okay with commissioners.
I think that makes complete sense, Commissioner Kelly. Thank you.
I appreciate that clarity, and I can certainly do so.
Great. Okay. Well, Britt and Steve, thank you for your time, conversation this evening, and have a good rest of your night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And speaking of neighborhood revitalization programs, queued up our next item nicely, and we can learn a little bit more about how Baldwin City does their neighborhood revitalization program. Sarah, do you have anything to introduce?
Well, while the mayor and the city manager from Baldwin City come forward, I would just provide some context that there are a number of neighborhood revitalization act programs in Douglas County. The ones the city of Lawrence puts together are fundamentally differently structured than the Baldwin City program. So it might be helpful, just even in the context of the discussion we just had, for you all to provide a little bit of background about how this program has worked in Baldwin City and how you all structure the program. So just invite you to come to the microphone and just give us a brief overview.
Mayor Casey Semino, Baldwin City. I'll start off and I'll kind of kick it to Glenn. This program was actually enacted before my first term as mayor by the previous city commission at that time. What really drove the conversation for Baldwin is we're a small town. We're very close to Lawrence. We're very close to Kansas City. So for us to compete for citizens or to entice citizens to live in ours, we really concentrated on affordable housing. And at that time, we really weren't having very much building being taken place, and Baldwin still coming out of the recession from 2008 and so on and so forth. So at that time, Glenn, and actually I was still involved in that, came to the county commission and spoke to the previous commission at that time about this. The neighborhood revitalization for Baldwin is different. We're a small town, so we included our whole entire community. Any new construction of commercial or residential gets what's considered 100% tax abatement for 5 years. And then any rehab that increases the assessed valuation of 10% or more gets abated on that increase, not on the full taxes, if that makes sense. So it's really helped us in these last few years. I mean, our growth hasn't been extraordinary or anything like that, but it has been a sustainable growth for a community our size. One of our largest needs was really met from this program, and that was affordable senior housing. We had, because of this program, where we were able to leverage that, work with the state for their incentive package that they offer for affordable housing, and bring 28 units for seniors into our community. And those were filled actually prior to them even being completed in construction. It also brought our old school building was converted into affordable living units. And those types, I believe he got 15 years on that because it was historic and it was affordable. So when a developer or somebody does a package like that where it's historic or affordable, they get a longer amount of time because we really have a desperate need in Baldwin for affordable living. So that's kind of the quick synopsis of that. And what's before the commission tonight is we learned when we came in front of the county commission last time, we hadn't gotten the school district's approval. And so they actually sent us back, and Commissioner Kelly was on that, to get school board approval. So we did that first this time before bringing it in front of you all tonight. So Sarah, did I hit on everything that you intended?
Yes, I think that's a really good overview of how the program works in Baldwin. And I just would add to, while I've got the appraiser here, these projects inside the county courthouse involve a number of our county departments in terms of the appraisal process, the tax roll certification process, and then in this case, so it's actually a rebate. So they pay it and then they're rebated the amount back, which involves the treasurer's office as well for that. So it's a process that the entire courthouse is involved in reviewing the plan and the program requirements, and then monitoring and tracking the properties that are on as a part of the plan and when they fall off the plan. So it's something that we around here are quite familiar with in terms of how those programs are structured.
And to add to that, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, the county deducts some of the funds when they rebate it back for the processing of the paperwork.
We take a small fee.
Yeah. But what we're seeing now is as we end and wind down the first 5 years, it has helped us. On a financial sense, those houses that were started the 5 year, they're coming on the tax rolls now. So it's helping fund. And that's kind of how our city commission look at it is, hey, we're going to get new revenue that we weren't already getting coming back on the tax roll to help continue to fund this. Our school district is really intrigued by this because our school district has lost enrollment over the last few years. So as a small community, we're thinking, hey, how can we work with the school district to continue to bring young families or any type of families into Baldwin that has children to help that. And we have seen some new families move into our community from it. We've seen a lot of seniors buy a lot of the new houses that are either downsizing from living in the county, move into Baldwin and take advantage of this program. And we've learned, or I've heard from those citizens, is that a lot of them are on fixed income, so it really helps them be able to transition from that. You know, earlier they spoke about the housing market and where, you know, everybody in Douglas County is with the lack of housing. So it's helped open up other housing as well, you know, as those transitions take place from either in the county into the city or somebody moving out of a larger house in Baldwin to one of the newer, smaller houses or vice versa, whichever they decide. Glenn, do you have anything to add?
Well, only this, that, you know, we approached the county commission 5 years ago, like the mayor said, and they said, go back to Cost School District first, which we did. And really the new agreement is exactly the same as it was 5 years ago, with one difference. 5 years ago, we learned, and we made a mistake, but we only learned it after we enacted the program. We defined the neighborhood revitalization zone as the city limits, which almost everybody does that. You identify either your city limits or a specific district. The flaw in that system, if you annex property in, they're not within the neighborhood revitalization zone. So this time when we approached rewriting this, we included the city limits and any property annex for now in the next 5 years. So that takes care of that problem. So if somebody does annex in, we just had, I think, 3 pieces of property were recently annexed into the city. So once they do that, though, so we haven't had a lot of annexation, so it wasn't a big issue, but I didn't want it to just include, because once you do that, you pass it, you're locked in for that zone for 5 years. So we didn't realize that 5 years ago. But other than that, it's really the same interlocal agreement, almost exactly verbatim, just change the dates. And the terms, again, 5 years of tax rebate. And Sarah's exactly right about that. You pay your taxes and you're rebated back. So it's not, that's a little different than the tax abatements you were talking about earlier for industrial growth. And I understand why people do that. The neighborhood revitalization does work for residential, commercial, industrial, everybody else. It works the same. And, and so it sounds like you're giving away 5 years of taxes and in a sense you are. But what I've seen in other communities I worked in and our community too, this is what people do with that tax rebate is they put it back on their property. So they build more. So by the time we get it on the tax rolls in 5 years, you're taxing a greater business or a bigger home or something like that. So the payoff for us is after that 5 year period, and you're getting a bigger assessed valuation is what you're getting, Sarah. So, and the mayor's right. One of what was driving this was that 10 years ago, we saw 1 or 2 homes per year, new homes involved with it. That was it. That was our total. And I was shocked by that when I counted there. So what do you mean 1 or 2 homes? That can't be serious. I used to talk about per month, per week. No, I said, no, per year, we're only getting 1 or 2 homes. So we did see our school aged children, they're declining. And so we figured out there's got to be a way to incentivize, especially young families to move to our city. So it's not a cure all for everything. It's not going to solve all of our problems, but it's a good tool for us to have. So we call it budget revenue neutral for us because we're not spending any money. As the usual incentive goes, you're rebating it as it comes in. So for us, it doesn't hurt next year's budget or anything like that. But again, the payoff, it's like an annuity, it pays off in 5 years. So you start getting a bigger return on that investment. So worked out great for us so far. We have, like I said, we haven't seen, a tremendous growth in our housing stock, but it's been nice to see the school loft apartments and the senior living, and there'll be some other ones coming on. So anyway, so that's where we're at. And if you have any questions, we went through that pretty quick.
That was a great quick overview. I really appreciate it's nice to hear how it's been going and that there's been some noticeable help and growth, and that it sounds like it's been well utilized. And I also appreciate the attention to detail about that language around any property that gets annexed into the city. That was a smart catch. So I appreciate you pointing that out.
Yeah.
And I think, so you've talked about how it's really open to all kinds of projects and anyone. Can you just briefly talk about how folks learn about it? Like process wise, I mean, when we think about developers and contractors and real estate investors, they tend to track those programs and know about them. But when we talk about individual home buyers and you're talking about younger families, how are folks learning about this as an incentive?
Yeah, mainly through our website and our social media. A couple of years ago, we hired somebody to do just media because we realized that was kind of a, well, that's how people find us. They find you online now. They don't normally just call or come by. If you're not online, you don't exist. So we have a lot of influence, and she's been very good at reaching out to all the different social media platforms. I don't know how she understands all that, but yeah, well, different generation, I guess. So that's how they found it. And it's on our website, and mainly that's how people have learned about it. And one of the great things about the program, though, is that it's not just for people building new, because that's always a criticism of incentives, is you're incentivizing somebody coming in. And what about me? Is I've been here for 20 years. I want to add on to my house. Well, as the mayor said, if you add a 10%, you are eligible for this. So it's flexible enough so it'll help existing people. So the first year we didn't get a lot of people in the program because they hadn't heard about it. But once we started talking about it at our council meetings and planning committee, and the word spread pretty quick internally, and then we advertised that externally as well. And so it worked. And so we got more and more people saying, what is that? That sounds too good to be true. What do you mean I got 5 years of tax rebate? Well, it does really work. So, and the other thing I didn't mention, I should, is that we're recently got into the Kansas Main Street program. It actually was a year ago, last March. Hard to believe we've been in now for a year. And one of our goals, of course, is to revitalize our downtown. The neighborhood revitalization will allow you to, again, if you improve your upstairs, if you own a store downstairs and you're going to do residential upstairs, that is eligible for neighborhood revitalization as well. So those programs are working together then very nicely on that sort of thing. So, and the Main Street has got its own promotions committee then, so they will actually be promoting that program as part of the incentive for the Main Street program as well. So that really works hand in glove with that.
Commissioner Reed, just to answer your question on the builders and stuff. So part of our application so as part of our application process for the builders, when they go get their building permit, this is included with that. So that all the builders are aware of the program, even if they live outside of Baldwin City. So that's included.
Great, thank you both. Any other questions from commissioners?
Quick question, and you may not have this, and that's fine. I'm just curious. Do you know the percentage of your properties that are within, this 5-year period right now?
I don't. No, that's a really good question. There's not many. Like I said, the first year we didn't get a lot of applications because people just they weren't aware. They didn't. Well, again, they thought it was too good to be true. So why do that? So we didn't get a lot of people that first year. I don't know what the percentage though is. So I don't know if we've ever even broken that down, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I'm just curious, and this question may not need an answer. It's just something to think about. Like, if this really takes off, it'll impact the services that you can provide, right? And just as you're thinking about where is that'd be a great problem to have, wouldn't it? That you'd have such an
We're hoping we have
explosion,
that problem.
right?
Actually. What do we do with all these people?
Explosion of growth in Baldwin would be great to have.
Yeah.
But I'm just curious if you've put any thought into and maybe you look to 5 years down the road and you think maybe next 5 years will look, but this is a good enough, I'm not going to say gamble, but a good enough investment maybe is another way to say it.
Oh yeah, the way you want to look at it is either gamble or investment. No, great question, and we thought about that even 5 years ago. We're a little different than the county is. You basically have property tax and sales tax and fees and other things like that. Since we're what we call a full service city, we have water, sewer, and the electric, and those are actually, as far as our budget goes, they're much bigger than property tax and sales tax. Through the pandemic, and amazingly enough, I think you experienced part of this too. Our sales tax grew every month, every quarter, every year through the pandemic. So, and it's really because more people we figure more people are working from home, shopping from home. So we have all these FedEx trucks and UPS trucks all over town every day, and they're doing their home delivery. So our sales tax actually has grown. So we're seeing more sales. Typically we've been really poor on sales tax, but not during the pandemic. So, but really as far as services go, it's really our wastewater, water and electric that really drive our budget more than property tax. So for us, it's not a real big bite of our budget to forego some property tax. We'll make it up if somebody comes in, especially if they have commercial or industrial, and they're using more electricity. That's actually where we make the most of our revenue. So for us, it's kind of a easy trade-off. For the county, The school district, I know, has a different funding formula, which we've gone over with them. And I don't think I'll ever really understand school funding, so I'm not going to try that. But I know they get per pupil. They do get students coming and whatever. So they actually are made up that way. And so you're probably the one who takes the most risk if we're doing the bet, because you rely more on two sources of income, where we have multiple sources. So if we got to forego property tax, that's the first thing we would forego.
Great.
Any further questions from commissioners? Okay, we'll go ahead and open this up for general public comment. I don't believe we have any guests here with us. Nobody online, it looks like. So we'll close public comment. Any further comments or discussion from commissioners?
I would just say that you made my point for me right there, right? So like, and when we think about, and let's be honest, there's been some things in the news about, how this county commission supports those outlying municipalities. And this is one of the ways we do support those outlying municipalities. This is I think, a significant investment that would have the potential to grow. There are services that we provide countywide that have costs to them. We see value in, I see value. I don't know how the other commissioners are going to vote yet, but I see value in expanding Baldwin and making sure they have those services. And this seems like a good tool to do that. But it is an investment from Douglas County as a whole in the community of Baldwin.
As Commissioner Reed, I really appreciate those points, Commissioner Kelly, and I think that it is important to highlight the type of program support, administrative work. Thank you, Sarah, for highlighting all the different departments that this touches in this building at the county level, and the kind of work that goes into these investments. But I would agree that there is a lot of value in it. And I've heard of neighborhood revitalization programs in the past, kind of knew that there were different versions of them, but have learned more about how different communities have made it work for what they need. And I think that you all in Baldwin City gave us a really good picture of how you needed it to work for your community, how it's been growing and evolving. And I'm really glad to hear about that progress, and hope that the next 5 years prove successful for you as well. And I just appreciate your time and overview for that. And we'll look forward to future conversations about it. And I think that it's always good for us in the public to hear some specific stories and kind of tangible tales, if you will, about how these different types of programs and different tools in our toolkit can go towards relieving some pressure for different municipalities, for individuals, to attract more business growth. So we have a bit of a common thread in our agenda tonight in talking about these programs, which I didn't put together necessarily when reading them independently, but it's been a good conversation. So anyway, thank you for this evening. Commissioner Portillo, do you have anything to add?
I have no additional comments. I just want to co-sign everything my fellow commissioners have said and put forward a motion.
Great.
So I move to approve the interlocal agreement with the City of Baldwin and Unified School District 348, establishing a 5-year neighborhood revitalization program.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Thank you both for joining us this evening. All right, we'll move on to item 4.3 and hear from our county appraiser.
Thank you, Commissioner. Steve Miles, our county appraiser, is here. And I just wanted to just have a brief opportunity for Steve to talk about the valuation notices that are showing up in mailboxes, and just have some high level conversation about where we're at in terms of, what Steve, some of the restrictions on how the appraisal process works, and just be available for some questions.
And Sarah, this is Commissioner Portillo. Before we turn it over to Steve, could you also maybe just put this into context for the process of our budget timeline, and overall how the county considers the decision-making process for what we do with valuation letters came out, how that's going to affect our our residents, and then how that may factor into our budget conversations and when those conversations will take place.
I'll do the best I can. What Steve's talking about this point is about property appraisal, which is what is the value of the property. Steve is not going to talk about the tax rate or the valuation, and Steve will correct me if I'm wrong here, the valuation. So then what that appraised amount is and what it is then turns into a value for taxation is actually set by statute. And that process all happens as of January 1st of a given year. So Steve's team has been working really hard to do that appraisal process, look at all the market data, and he can go into some of that. And then this process is where we notify property owners about their value, the market-based value of their property, and commercial property owners as well. Then there's an appeal process, and Steve certifies appraisal values to me June 1st. Yes, June 1st. So this process is now underway, and Steve's team will continue to be very busy until June 1st. As the commissioners know, I start working on budget long before June 1st, but really that does not come into a certified tax roll until June 1st. At that point in time, it is translated into what is the value based off of the mills that is brought forward to the commissioners for consideration in their budget. So the amount of the mill levy, the amount of taxes that are charged for property taxes is different than this process today, where we're really just talking about the value of of a person's particular property. Is that kind of what you were looking for?
That's 100% what I was
Okay,
looking for. I'm
great.
sorry, I didn't mean for it to sound so much like an oral exam in a final in a local finance
It does.
class, but
It's,
like that was a textbook perfect answer. I just wanted to make sure that folks know how do all the pieces fit together.
right.
And thank you for answering that.
Yeah, and and I think we'll talk, we talk more as we go through this process about what the mill levy is set at. And that's different for each taxing jurisdiction that a particular property resides. Most properties in Douglas County sit in at least 3 to 5 different taxing districts, right, Steve?
That's pretty close, yeah.
Yeah. So each of those governing bodies makes those decisions, but it's all based off this property appraisal number that Steve's team works on. I probably covered most of what you wanted to talk about, right, Steve?
Well, yes.
I mean, for her to steal your thunder, Steve.
No, good.
Rest I
Good
remember
evening,
it all.
commissioners and everybody that's here and everybody who's listening online. I am Steve Miles. I'm the county appraiser. I've been in that position for about 12, 13 years now. I've worked for the county for 31 years in this department. So been in it a while, heard a lot of things. Sarah kind of took most of my speech away from me here, but yes, essentially the appraiser's office is charged with valuing all taxable property within the county. And that includes all real estate and all personal property that is taxable. And that can cover things such as mobile homes, large trucks, trailers, ATVs, UTVs, boats, watercraft, that sort of thing. Personal property is self-reported, meaning that the owner is required to tell the county that you own that. We try to assist them by following up each year. If you've reported it one year, we'll follow up with a rendition asking, do you still own this, basically? And then hopefully we try and catch anything new that comes up. A lot of people don't realize that their ATV, their four-wheeler, that they are really supposed to be paying tax on that. Sometimes we get discovery from dealerships that sell those types of things. FAA reports on airplanes, the KA, Kansas Wildlife and Parks Department issues KAA numbers. I believe that's right. So we get a list of those. So we do some discovery as well. But technically, by statute, all personal property is to be reported to the county appraiser.
I can remember going with my dad when I was a kid, and I'm not going to tell you how long ago that was, but I remember sitting with him at the appraiser's office and going over how many cows he had, how many hogs, sheep, cattle, everything, because at one time, everything was taxable. And since that time, a lot of the personal property has kind of been taken off the books. So that number keeps going down each year. We are required to appraise everything as of January 1, but our values, change of value notices don't go out till March 1st. So obviously we just sent those out. We sent out almost right around 41,265 of those, I believe. And we're hearing from some of the owners this past week or so. I think everybody realized that the values were probably going to go up if they've been following the reports in the newspaper from realtors, from bankers, from everybody indicating that the values are going to go up. I think what was shocking to some people was how much they went up. Here in Douglas County, and most of this is in my last newsletter, March 1st. But here in Douglas County, things, residential properties went up on average about 17%. Commercial properties about 4.1. Ag properties about 4.1, and vacant land around 2.8, I believe it was. And so I think people are just a little shocked a little bit. They knew their value was going to go up, but just how much. Now, I said that was an average. That means that there were some that went up quite a bit more than that. There were some that didn't go up near that much either. But I have to report in broad terms and can't, I can't specifically state any one property really. But in my newsletter, I put a little chart in there by class. And when I say class, I'm referring to the classification of property for ad valorem tax purposes. We have various classes that are set by the state statute: residential, farm, or farmstead rather, vacant, agricultural, which would be just land and the ag buildings, and then commercial and not for profit, and then a couple of others, but they're pretty minor. But you can see in that chart that's in the newsletter and as part of my agenda packet here, that we did have an increase pretty much in all those classes this year. Why did that increase happen? Residential, it's due to low inventory as a big part, low interest rates. People are able to leverage their money a little better, and then just general demand. People are working from home. They don't have to maybe live in a certain area because of proximity to their job. Now they can get onto the computers and do their job basically from anywhere. So they're looking at areas that they feel comfortable living. I know over the years, many times in conversations with people, particularly older people retiring, they came back to Lawrence because they went to school here. That's not the reason that I'm going to stay in the area, because I went to school at the other school, but at any rate, they feel like they are comfortable here. They like the atmosphere. They just like Lawrence. As I said in my packet, about 96% of the residential properties realized an increase over their 2021 values. And when I say that, I'm talking about properties, existing properties, I'm not really including new properties in that percentage as well. The the values, the total value, and this does include new properties, but the total value increased about $203,327,900, and roughly about 14.2% across the board. That would be commercial and everything. So it's a pretty hefty increase. Now, we are getting a lot of calls. You do have the opportunity as a taxpayer to, or property owner rather, to contest that value that we send out the 1st of March. And that's kind of what we're getting ready for. I have been trying to gear up for the prospect of doing quite a few appeals or informal meetings. So far, I've only gotten about 100 applications in. Now, after people listening to this, I'm sure I'll get more tomorrow. But at any rate, it may be a pretty heavy appeal season for us. Typically, throughout the whole appeal process, not just the informals, but throughout the whole appeal process, which involves going to the 2nd level, the payment under protest later in the year and that sort of thing. We generally see somewhere in the neighborhood of about 1% decrease in our assessed valuation by the end of the year, by the time tax bills are have came out. And so this number that I've given you right now is, it probably will reduce a little bit. How much, I'm not sure of. But I feel pretty confident in the percentage increase, because all of the national markets are reporting higher sale prices on their homes. National Realtors just recently put out that that house prices, sale prices have increased 16.9%, which follows pretty close to what we found in our analysis. There was a report recently put out by the FHA that indicated that values were up 15.9%, I believe it was. And so we're pretty much in the ballpark. Recently, the Property Valuation Division, who oversees valuation in the state of Kansas, polled some of the other counties, and they generally were in the 15 to 25% range on their residential. So I feel pretty confident that we're right there. As Sarah indicated, my job, the charge that the state statute has put on this position is simply to value the property. Much to people's chagrin, it doesn't, part of that process does not include the ability to pay the taxes. But I would like people to think in terms of, I'm helping them report or figure out that their net worth is actually increasing by owning this property. And so we're providing a service in that respect. Yes, it does eventually equate to taxes. That's where budget processes come in, and decisions are made otherwise, which are based on that valuation, but they do not set the taxes. So ultimately, when people open their change of value notice, they faint, but then once they recover, they look at it and say, oh my gosh, my taxes are going to go up. And I can't say, when they call me and say that, I can't tell them that, yes, their taxes are going to go up. Yes, their value has gone up, but I don't know what the taxes are at this point in time. That comes later. And so that's the struggle that we have in our department, is trying to, at this point in time, is trying to get that point across and help people understand that their property is truly valued somewhere near what we have. Now, obviously, if there's differences in our records that we didn't know about, we don't go inside houses. So we're looking at the outside, and making determinations and sometimes broad determinations based on what we see. And so we can have some discrepancies. And that's what the appeal or the informal meeting process is all about, is to discuss those things and help people realize or make corrections to the record. So we're not opposed to visiting with people and making changes if they're necessary, but we also will do our research and determine, is it truly something that affects the value of the property. Personal property, don't have those numbers yet. Currently, as of right now, we're looking at around, got it here, but it's small print, 93 million in appraised value. That's different than assessed value, but appraised value. But we're still in the process of valuing personal property. Those change of value notices go out the 1st of May. And then as Sarah said, all the real estate and personal property values will be certified June 1st. And that's the number that then the budget people work with and determine the mill levies eventually. Renditions were sent out around the 1st of January. We sent out about 7,000 renditions for personal property. We've currently got back about 3,000, so we still have some more to get back in. We're processing and valuing those properties that we've gotten reported so far, and that's where that number comes from right now. Gosh, you know, I could probably get into more detail about how some of it works, but I think I'm going to conclude and open it up for questions from you folks, and let us all go home.
Steve, one of the items that I know that we've discussed is Steve and I have both been in the appraisal and assessed valuation conversation long enough to remember the 2008 housing crisis when we had a lot of foreclosures on property. And I think this is, you know, one of those we look back and we talk about, like, so what does this mean when you have this kind of increase in appraised value in such a rapid time frame? Is this some sort of anomaly? Is there some sort of bubble? And, you know, I think going back to my, principles of government finance in master's class, property is extremely stable revenue appraisal process. It's an extremely stable investment. In that process in 2008 through 2010 in Douglas County, properties didn't, even though we had a number of foreclosures and market prices were dropping, property held value pretty consistently over the entire county, because property is generally a very stable investment. So I think, in that situation, you had a very different set of factors going into a negative recession. And at that point, property still held. So I think looking at this, what it means is, do I think year over year, properties will continue to jump by market values like we're seeing this year? No. But will it hold its value? Likely, yes. And I think that's what makes property such a stable revenue source, and which makes it such a stable investment. But I don't know, Steve, if there's other thoughts about that in terms of, and I do want to say a few things, like, there was an article in the paper related to a growth and appraised value. I will take a little bit of umbrage with the notion that our general growth rate is 2 to 4%. Last year was an outlying year of a little over 2%. That was extremely low for Douglas County. Generally, as a rule, we are in excess of 4%. Somewhere between 4 and 5, at least in my 11 or 12 years doing budgets here, is where the total assessed valuation growth comes in. And that demonstrates a steady growth in the value of this investment and the value of our property in Douglas County. I do think that this is a reflection of some of the factors that Steve talked about and also just a real crunch in inventory. So back to supply and demand, when the supply is lessened, the cost goes up. And what will happen as those factors change, I think will be determined by some of those market forces.
Right. We try and report what the market is doing or has done. I've over 30 years of time, I've been accused of setting the market. We don't do that. We're always reporting. I always figure we're 6 months to a year behind in our valuation sometimes. Simply because of the time frame that everything has to happen. We're, like I say, we're valuing 40,000 parcels or more, and it takes a little time to put that all together. Property Valuation Division, which is part of the Department of Revenue, oversees all appraisal in the state of Kansas. And they do, we have to meet compliance requirements with them. We've consistently been substantially compliant with all the requirements. They also do a sales ratio study, which looks at what has a property actually sold for and what was our value of it. And we typically will run between 94 and 97%. Now, as I said, we follow the market a little bit. So there was one year we were a little over 100%, which means that we were a little high at that point. But we came back down the next year making the adjustment. So we typically are in the 94 to 97% across the board on all commercial and residential real estate. That's pretty good. You can't get too much better than that.
This is Commissioner Reed. Thank you so much, Steve. We really appreciate that overview. It was illuminating for me personally. It helped me have a better grasp on kind of where we're at and what the process looks like from here on out this year. And I really appreciate you taking the time to explain those things and talk about what that appeals process and contest process is like. I recognize that it'll probably be a pretty busy season for you, like you said, and just appreciate your work and due diligence and giving folks the opportunity for those processes. The only question I have, and it's really minor, it's just a curiosity, on page 3 of your packet, the property class kind of overall valuations, I noticed that of course it's up in every category except for nonprofit. And I'm just curious, is that always the trend, or is there some particular explanation for that?
Every year, some of these classes will change. So I would look at that decrease there as being primarily that a nonprofit would, for whatever reason, became for profit, and therefore changed class from not for profit to something else.
The class of property. So that particular property was classified as nonprofit one year. They may have sold it and now it's a commercial, or now it's something
That
else.
makes sense. Property changing hands. Okay, that helps me.
class.
Yeah, that gives me some context. Thank you.
Okay.
Any questions from other commissioners? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and open this up for, did you have something to add, Steve?
I was just going to say that if anybody has any questions, my phone number, my email address is on the website. People have found it. And I believe I've gotten more emails this year than I recall getting in the past, but mostly questions. How can this be? And we do our best to try and explain it and point it out.
Yeah, thanks for that, Steve. I appreciate you highlighting that, and questions are good. And I mean, all of this is pretty convoluted information if it's not what you're working and doing on a regular basis. So I appreciate you being here tonight and us taking this opportunity to kind of explain process start to finish, and with the different requirements statutorily are and what the market realities are. I think that's good public education, and I know we will continue to work on how to communicate answers to those common questions that we're getting. And for anybody who's listening to this, just want to encourage folks to, be curious. It's important to be curious and reach out and get some clarity about that. But I also just want to highlight, I appreciate your framing earlier, Steve, of how this appraisal process, I mean, that it is a service in essence, it's statutorily required, of course, through the state, but it is a service to property owners to know the growth in their investment in the real property that they have. And there are real life implications. It has other impacts. And I understand folks reacting to it with shock and surprise, but this season seems like an opportunity for us to do more public awareness and education about what all the different pieces of this process looks like. And I always like when we get an opportunity to educate the public about government processes and what the different definitions of things mean and how those things are impacted by one another. So anyway, I just really appreciate the overview tonight. And Sarah, thanks for adding, giving a good preview for Steve. And then you elaborated really well. You worked well in concert. So anything else to add?
I just, Steve is a county employee. Sometimes people forget that, and we just really appreciate the work that you do, Steve. I do understand that community members it's a little alarming. I mean, just the numbers that they're seeing. And so I think that reaction is warranted. We are just at the beginning of this process. That is not a tax bill. That's just a evaluation. And hopefully people will hang in there with us as we start doing that work on budget, as Sarah talked through earlier. But I think that public's reaction is totally understandable. This is, as Sarah pointed out, this is a unique year. It is not what we see consistently. And I think that will bring some questions up for us as we start to work on budget and mill levies and those types of things. So really appreciate your report as always. Great job, Steve. Thank you.
Commissioner Reed again, I clicked away or actually closed that out, but I believe we don't have any action on this item. That was information only, right? Okay. Oh, yes, thank you for reminding me about public comment. Don't see anybody here. Anybody online? Okay, close public comment. Thank you again, Steve. And with that, we'll go ahead and move on to appointments. Any this week, Sarah? Don't believe so. Okay, so how about miscellaneous items?
Commissioners, you have a memo from me in your packet. I do want to remind everyone that we are not meeting next week. We are scheduled to be off because there are 5 Wednesdays in March. I did want to also talk, I've had some commissioners doing some planning ahead on some schedules. We had planned to take June 1st off because there are 5 Wednesdays in June. I now have probably 2 commissioners with a conflict on the May 20, the last Wednesday in May.
May 25th.
25th. I would propose that instead we meet June 1st and not meet the 25th.
That is exceptionally good.
And if that works for everybody, but I kind of want to make sure far enough in advance, since we had already planned to be off June 1st, Commissioner Portillo, I don't just want to make sure we obviously could just not meet on the 25th and not meet on the 1st, if that's what the commission wants to do.
Sorry, that face was the reverse face that I wanted to make. I can't be here on the 25th either. So
Oh, well, perfect.
it's even better.
Align.
On the 1st.
All right. So we will take May 25th off. And then are we comfortable then meeting in June for those 5 Wednesdays in June? We could decide if we get through that, if there's something towards the end of June that we want to have a break between that and budget. So, but I want to go ahead and plan for a June 1st meeting, if that's okay with the commission.
Sounds
All right.
good.
That's all I have tonight, commissioners. And a reminder, we do have a work session on the 23rd when we've come back on the Corporation for Supportive Housing. That's all I've got.
This is Commissioner Portillo. I just want to let my fellow commissioners know that we had a great CJCC meeting yesterday where we heard a final report from the academics at Northeastern and had a really great conversation about the data that we currently have. But one of the things that I was most hopeful about is that all of our jurisdictions here locally, so all the jurisdictions that are collaborating as part of that research, the Sheriff's Office, Lawrence Police Department, KU Police Department, Baldwin Police Department, Eudora Police Department, have all agreed to continue to collect data for us after the research period. And I'm really grateful to Dr. Cravens, who will continue to help them process and analyze those data, but that will help us ensure that the recommendations that they're putting in place, that we can actually see how those are working out in the data. So very grateful to all of the jurisdictions locally who are going to continue to do that work with us and continue to talk about it in the CJCC. So it was a great discussion. We also had a really nerdy discussion about stats. If you want to go back and watch it, highly recommend. Also, probably one of the key examples that we can use for quantitative literacy requirements in all levels of education.
Thank you, Commissioner Portillo. Anything from you, Commissioner Kelly? Nope. Okay, I will just take a quick moment and highlight for anybody who is listening or might listen to this later that we do have a number of open appointments kind of upcoming later this season in the next few months on a variety of boards and commissions throughout the community. So just want to let folks know that we've got, I forget exactly what we call it, but an interest form essentially on our website. And you can read a little bit about all of those different things from Criminal Justice Coordinating Council to the Mental Health Board and a whole variety of other things. So just want to encourage that folks check those out. Let us know if you're interested because we have some appointments to make this year. And with that, I don't think we have anything else, so we are adjourned.